In recent years, we have witnessed a troubling phenomenon. The very movements that once championed human rights, tolerance, and justice are now entangled in narratives that fuel anti-Semitism. Our panel discussion will explore how this paradox has arisen, and more importantly, how it can be addressed. I would like to invite Dr. Gadi Taub, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Mr. Arno Klarsfeld, Franco-Israeli jurist and politician, Mrs. Cariz Rea, producer at Epoch Times and a fellow at the Middle East Forum, Mrs. Natasha Hausdorff, barrister and legal director of the UK LFI Charitable Trust, and Mr. Stefan Tompson, founder of Visegrad 24, to join me for the discussion. Thank you all for joining me for this important panel. We are going to discuss the connections between progressivism and anti-Semitism. And Mrs. Hausdorff, I would like to start with you. Take us to the point, yeah, you can just take one of them. Take us to the point when the progressivism and the anti-Semitism are bonding together.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I think it's extraordinary, first of all, to see such an enormous group of people from around the world coming together with one goal, with one aim, to combat anti-Semitism. And to be able to do that, perhaps to better understand this new anti-Semitism that Foreign Minister Tsar was starting to unpack for us. And unfortunately, the progressivism, so-called, has a great deal to answer for in the context of this new anti-Semitism that is focused on the Jewish state, the Jew amongst the nations. And it strikes me that at the core of this, and everything that we have been witnessing on university campuses in particular, in the US, across Europe, is something actually that I saw recently dealt with in a very impressive paper. I know Elisa Lewin from the Louis Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law is here with us. An impressive paper put out by that organization on erasure anti-Semitism. This is a form of anti-Semitism that seeks to erase Jewish identity, and in particular, Jewish racial and national identity and the link between the Jews and the State of Israel. And this is why I think it is particularly closely linked with the new anti-Semitism that we have heard already addressed. In particular, it seeks to deny the Jewish people's indigeneity in Judea, in the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, and to take away that central connection is also an erasure of the historical and religious underpinnings of the Jewish presence here. But it's that historical denialism which plays into, and this is perhaps the last aspect of this I'll unpack, the weaponization of international law, international legal phraseology, which is also a particular plank of progressive anti-Semitism. The words that we are now very familiar with, the modern blood libels, occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, apartheid, and now genocide, they all have something very important in common. They follow this pattern of blaming the victims of these acts of the very crimes that were committed against them. So we have, the Jordanian occupation of Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem, the ethnic cleansing of Jews, colonialism before the establishment of the State of Israel, the real apartheid. There are no Jews in areas A and B of the West Bank. The only Jews in Gaza are those still being brutally held hostage by Hamas. And of course, the real acts of genocide that occurred on the 7th of October and that have been threatened over and over again. And the way that these new strains of anti-Semitism have found so much fertile ground in academia, in international discourse, in the media, is integral to this new anti-Semitism and to the way that the progressive left in particular has sought to weaponize this phenomenon. It is by understanding it and analysing it that I think we will all be far better empowered to be able to tackle it in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Arno Klarsfeld, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I am wondering, how do you see this connection? How do you see these expressions in France, for example, and in particular in the way that the political right in France is being covered in the media?
Well, I would like to thank the initiative of Mr. Amirai Chikli in inviting Jordan Bardella of the Rassemblement National Party, which is led by Marine Le Pen, because it's a very wise initiative. Today, the Rassemblement National, which is no more the extreme right, is a party which favors the Jews and understands the complexity of Israel in living in a hostile neighborhood. And it's a major change in the political life of France. And today, the extreme left has become the extreme right, and the extreme right has become a party which favors the Jews and understand Israel and support Israel. A lot of people say, well, how can it be? How did it change? Well, if you remember history, my father, maybe a lot of people here know my family, Serge and Beata Klarsfeld. My mother was twice presented by the Knesset for the Nobel Peace Prize. My father and mother tracked down Nazi criminals all over the world and brought them to justice. My cousin Dor Sadeh was killed in Kfar Aza, liberating the kibbutz on October 9th. His grandfather died in the 1973 war, during the Yom Kippur War. So we know what it is to fight for Israel, and we know what it is to fight the extreme right. But when we see that the extreme right is no longer the extreme right, well, we have to say it. We have to be clear. And the dangers in France for the Jews are now the extreme left and the radical Islam. It's obvious for everyone who is really honest. So we have to take this into account and remember that during, for example, my father says that during the First World War, it was the Germans who liberated the Jews from the Russian pogroms. And 20 years later, it was the Russians who liberated the Jews from the German pogroms. Antisemitism changed in history, and we have to take that into account. And the initiative of Mr. Chikli and the Israeli government to invite the Rassemblement National in Israel for the first time, it's a very major change, is something which is honest and take into account the changes which happen in France. And a lot of Jews in France fear the extreme left and the radical Islam. And who is fighting the radical Islam? The Rassemblement National, and a little bit the center party and the right, but not the extreme left, which is gaining power through La France Insoumise, and not too much the center. So it's a very good initiative, and all the Jews in France should be thankful to Mr. Chikli for that initiative.
Mr. Tompson, what is the role of the media in this situation? Arno was speaking about how the radical Islam and the progressivism were more, you consider more anti-Semitism, and how the right is still being portrayed as the anti-Semite group. But what is the role of the media in this situation?
I think that the world makes a lot more sense when you start to understand that the left doesn't hate oppression, it hates competence, it hates excellence. And the media is filled with leftist activists who very much embody the hatred of competence, of excellence, of talent, of hard work. And essentially what we have, it is not, the war on hierarchy is not a war on hierarchy led by the left because hierarchy is fundamentally unjust. It is because the leftist, in his incompetence, is never able to rise to the top of the hierarchy unless he games the system. And that is, in many ways, the Jewish people have outperformed, and they've outperformed wherever they've been in the diaspora. The state of Israel is a beacon in the Middle East. It's a beacon of talent, of success, of building an ecosystem of amazing tech companies. It is the story of turning the desert and the swamp into fertile agricultural land. It is a story of talent, hard work, excellence, and competence, everything that the left despises. And thus, we have a media that is filled with incompetent people, filled with resentful people.
Do you think we need, I mean, maybe we should do a difference between the left and the progressivism left? Is there a difference?
No, of course there is a difference. It would be unfair to characterize every single leftist as someone who's pathologically incompetent. I'm a reasonable man. I believe there are reasonable leftists. The progressivists, the radical progressivists, certainly hate talent and absolutely hate competence. And that is the embodiment of that. I think there is a very strong link between those things, and I hope that Gadi here, who's on this panel, will be able to tell us much more about that. I think he's much better placed to talk about it than I am. But the media certainly has, in a very strange alliance, the progressives have found very strange bedfellows, and they found them both amongst the Islamists, amongst the increasing number of migrants from radical Muslim countries and their progeny, second and third generation. Every single data set that we have shows us that in the West, second and third generation migrants from Middle Eastern countries are more radical than the ones who left initially. They have become a fertile ground of voters, and thus that is partially led by that. And then we have the horseshoe theory, where I think Karis will be able to tell us more about that, where we have we have the woke left, and of course we have an element of the woke right that has also become resentful. But it is fundamentally, I do think that much of this can be tracked down to envy and resentment. And I think that we see a lot of that in media, and especially in modern mainstream media. And that is, in many ways you can classify the radical progressivist, it can be described as the embodiment of Cain.
Dr. Gadi Taub, not many people, I will phrase it different. There were media platforms that didn't want this conference to exist. Can you connect between this resistance to this conference and what we are speaking about in this panel?
Absolutely. Haaretz, which you are alluding to, is the branch of progressivism in Israel. And allegedly, Haaretz contacted probably many of you, telling you that you should stay away from this conference because there are right-wing people here, and some of them have a past that is anti-Semitic, and so you are defeating the purpose. While I think we could read this much more simply. Haaretz is an anti-Semitic paper, and it doesn't like us fighting anti-Semitism. That is all. That is the whole story. Because I don't know if you know, Haaretz has been, the mission of Haaretz ever since Amos Shokan has taken it. I should make a disclaimer here. They fired me. They fired me for having an opinion that is not theirs.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. Amos Shokan said Gadi Taub's opinions are illegitimate and should not be heard because I supported the reform. Half of the country is illegitimate in the eyes of the elite, and this is the essence of progressivism, right? Because what the progressives, the progressive way to defend democracy is to paralyze citizens, because citizens, in their opinion, are the greatest danger to the democratic form of government. So Haaretz has been systematically undermining Zionism, and the enmity between progressivism and Zionism is central. It's essential, and you cannot bypass it. Because in the progressive worldview, justice is identified with weakness. The weaker you are, the more just you are considered. And Zionism is about gaining power, because in the eyes of Zionism, it is immoral to remain weak if you can have power, because power is the only way to do good in the world. One of the ways to do good in the world is defend ourselves. This is why we are proud of our military, we are proud of our economy, we are proud, Stephen, of our competence, because being weak and whining is not moral in the eyes of Zionism. So I'll tell you just briefly this story, because I've been following this for 30 years. Haaretz has been systematically undermining Zionism. That was its mission. It began in the 90s when they gave the post-colonial students of Zionism, the School of Post-Colonial Edward Said style studies, are inherently anti-Semitic, and they've imported this to Israel, and these literary supplements of Haaretz gave them front and center. Not only were their works, which portrays Zionism as a colonial movement, illegitimate morally, not only were their works front and center, the reviewers in Haaretz were the people of this school. Yet they kept saying they're not anti-Zionists. They suddenly declared this. Do you know when? September of 2023. Aluf Ben, the editor of Haaretz, declared a special project, as he called it. It's time, he said, to take the word Jewish out of the definition of the state as the Jewish and democratic. It will remain only democratic. Why did he suddenly confess what Haaretz has been doing for so long? Because the reform was defeated, and the Supreme Court was further empowered. And the only way to make this state not Jewish is to annihilate democracy. Because so long as you have a Jewish majority and universal suffrage, we would choose Saturday as our day of rest, the Jewish calendar as our holidays, the Hebrew language and the rest of the Jewish tradition as our roots. And then the project was shelved, because 2.5 weeks later was October 7th. And then it would be a hard sell for Jews to say that you don't need a Jewish state. But Aluf Ben was angling for a way to cancel the Jewish character of the state of Israel via a minority that rules the Supreme Court, and our Supreme Court is progressive. The opinion of the judges of the Supreme Court is about the same as Meretz, which didn't make it to the parliament because they didn't pass the threshold. So it's a tiny progressive minority opinion, and the editor of Haaretz saw an opportunity to impose the state of all its citizens, to cancel the Jewish character of the state via the Supreme Court by striking down the law that defines the national character of Israel. He could only do it after the defeat of democracy. Now this project has been shelved. Thank you.
Thank you, Gadi. Caris, we have to speak about something which maybe is not speaking much, and it's the connection between progressivism to some figures who are considered themselves as right, like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, and I think this is something that we all have interest in.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me on this panel to talk about this. I'd just like to preface this by saying that I am a proud America First, pro-Trump, MAGA conservative. And I have been covering anti-Semitism on the progressive left and within radical Islam for the last 15 years. But now there is an even newer anti-Semitism than the new anti-Semitism that we see percolating within the MAGA America First camp. Does anybody know how many followers Tucker Carlson has on X, for example? I'll give you a hint. It's more than there are Jews in the world. Okay? And here are the things, since October 7th, I have a list here, that have come out of either Tucker's mouth or the mouths of guests that he proudly endorses. The Mossad carried out 9/11 and assassinated JFK. October 7th was a false flag attack. Stalin was a Jew, so was Ataturk. Jews were kidnapping Christian children in Nazi Germany. The Star of David has satanic origins. Israel oppresses Christians. Hitler wasn't as bad as people imagine, and Nazi atrocities were exaggerated. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Mossad. Israel is genociding children in Gaza. Jews are Bolsheviks. Hamas didn't commit rape or kill babies on October 7th. Israel is a client state of America. Zionists control the media and rule Wall Street. AIPAC is a foreign lobby that wields undue power and influence over the US government. The Israelis deliberately attacked the USS Liberty. Zionists are warmongering neocons trying to goad America into war with Iran. American Jews are more loyal to Israel. Netanyahu has secret plans for a greater Israel. Israel is responsible for all conflict in the Middle East.
I think we understood who is the person.
Oh, really? Because I have like 2 more hours of this. Why is this important to talk about? Why am I mentioning this? Because people have noticed that while this group of people of which Tucker Carlson is considered the godhead of, call themselves pro-America First, pro-Trump, they are actually using the same tactics and behaviors, and they even have the same values as progressives, woke progressives on the left, which is why this group has, in my opinion, rightly been termed the woke right, as well as other less charitable names. And in what ways are they progressive? They are utilizing things like identity politics. They have a victimhood complex. They embrace moral relativism, postmodernism, cancel culture, bullying, self-righteousness. The list goes on and on. There is a battle for MAGA's soul right now, and people are not paying attention. And if we don't preserve what Trump is trying to do and rooting out anti-Semitism, we saw what happened with the left. It doesn't take more than a small group of people to hijack an entire party and make the majority beholden to the minority. So we have to start speaking about this now. Yesterday, Natan Sharansky said that we have to be able at the dinner or at the president's residence, that we have to be able to call out the right just like we call out the left. We have to be able to call out our own party because identity politics knows no bounds.
Thank you. As you can see, we've left only with 4 minutes, and I do want to hear each of you one more time. So if you can submit for us in one sentence, each one of you, the future of the bonding between progressivism to anti-Semitism.
I think the essence of this, as with combating anti-Semitism more broadly, is ultimately education. I have been extremely privileged for the last 10 years to be involved with an incredible organisation called UK Lawyers for Israel. Our CEO, Jonathan Turner, and his wife, Caroline, who have led the way on this across that period, are here, and I'm incredibly grateful to their leadership. And as legal director of the UK LFI Charitable Trust, one of our major focuses in terms of combating anti-Semitism is education. And the good news, ladies and gentlemen, is that the truth is on our side. Everything that I set out earlier, all of these elements of the new manifestation of anti-Semitism, these modern blood libels, they are false. We have the facts and we have the law with us. And so I think the education and the, if I may say, tachlis approach, which I would certainly advocate very strongly for, is going to be our route through this. The ancient blood libel that Jews killed Christian children to use their blood to make matzah or for religious ritual was extremely widely believed. It's still believed in certain pockets, especially in the Middle East, but for the most part we've been able to eradicate that falsehood. And the same will go for the falsehoods, the blood libels that the progressives in particular have trafficked in to date, and those weaponized terms of international law, which are so far gaining so much traction at the International Court of Justice, at the International Criminal Court,
Natasha,
and at the UN.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Taub, please, in one sentence.
One sentence. Do not apologize, but attack. when they blame us for racism. Thank you. Don't explain and don't apologize. Blame them for racism because they are the autoimmune disease by which racism has re-entered our culture, and we should call them out instead of apologizing ourselves.
Thank you.
One sentence. The pessimistic point of view is that each generation of Jews had to fight against anti-Semitism. And the optimist point of view is that the Jews were here when the pyramids were built, and the Jews are still here when the skyscrapers are built. So there's hope, and each Jew has to cherish the memory of the Shoah and defend the state of Israel.
I would just say that if people aren't familiar, they should understand something called the horseshoe theory, which is the idea that the political spectrum is not a line, but in actuality it's a horseshoe. So the farther to the left and the farther to the right you get, you actually loop back around and you tend in the same direction. And at the core of that, today we're seeing not just an anti-Semitic subgroup, but it is also anti-American and anti-Western. And also, I think we should get the hashtag Tucker Carlson trending.
The good news is that we are the side that builds, we are the side of competence, we are the side of talent, we are the side of hard work. Our enemies only know how to destroy, and we will keep building no matter how hard they press against us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Taub, Mr. Klarsfeld, Mrs. Rea, Mrs. Hausdorff, and Mr. Tompson. Thank you for being with us on this panel.